Good evening and welcome to Tianguis Turístico Mexico, held at Acapulco 2015. We have the honor of having the Secretary of Tourism of Mexico, Ms. Claudia Ruiz Macier. Welcome, Madam Secretary. By the same token, we have two special guests as part of Tianguis, Mexican Chancellor Jose Antonio Meade, who is likewise with us today, and Francisco Gonzalez, Director General of PROMÉXICO. Likewise, we have the three undersecretaries of tourism who are likewise with us today. Secretaries of tourism from the different states of Mexico. Even more important, we have many of the buyers who represent 64 countries in addition to Mexico who came to discover, or actually to rediscover the tourist offering that we have in our country. By the same token, we have members from the mass media who have been supporting us throughout these days in Tianguis. This is conveying the different news and achievements of Tianguis Turístico. I would like to formally introduce Francisco Gonzalez Diaz, Director General of PROMÉXICO. Francisco Gonzalez Diaz, as Director General of PROMÉXICO, leads the efforts of the country for the fostering of exports, the drawing of direct foreign investment, and internationalization of Mexican businesses since June 2013. He has more than 20 years of a professional career committed with the country's growth. In the private sector, he actively participated as an entrepreneur in the sectors of biotechnology and nutrition, as well as the banking and finances. At present, the holds an honorary position as chairman of the board of Guadalajara Digital Creative City. In addition to what I have mentioned, Francisco has broad experience in promoting Mexico abroad. Since from 2002, he has held a series of positions as ambassador of the United States of Mexico to the Federal Republic of Germany, regional director for Europe, Middle East, Africa of PROMÉXICO, and trade attaché for Germany, Central and Eastern Europe of Bancomext. As above mentioned, he plays an important role in what's the Guadalajara Digital Creative City. He was awarded twice with the Cross of Knight Commander of the Merit Order of the Federal Republic of Germany, as with the degree of Cross of Knight Commander and Cross of Grand Official. In 2014, he received the acknowledgement to professional merit at the ITAM for his outstanding achievement and professional career in the public sector. Let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Gonzalez Diaz. Dear Madam Secretary, Claudia Ruiz Macier, Secretary of Tourism, to whom I would like to deeply thank for this invitation. Of course, it's always a pleasure to work with you and your secretariat. Dear Secretary, Mr. Jose Antonio Ruiz Culibreña, always work hand in hand quite pleasantly. Secretaries, undersecretaries, friends all. Distinguished secretaries of tourism, entrepreneurs of the tourist sector, representatives of the mass media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you very much for being with us and bearing with us because of the delay of this presentation. This presentation is like a concert. At a concert, we have the performer who will have the main role, who is the secretary. And then we have the band, who are the ones that cheer the presentation. We are pleased to be here for the 40th anniversary of this Tianguis Turístico that not only encourages and fosters the tourism industry, but likewise the national development. I just recently read a phrase from a Chinese philosopher that I would like to share with you. He said that a travel of 1,000 kilometers starts with the first step. Therefore, I would like to start by addressing the close relationship between PROMÉXICO and the Secretary of Tourism, whose main goal is to foster the trade of tourism industry. Study of the OECD identified that tourism is a key sector for the fostering of sales abroad. Actually, tourism generated $7.6 billion globally in 2014 and 1 out of 11 jobs worldwide. In Mexico, this sector is an important economic source for those who take an income for their families, as well as for those who make of this sector global business. Therefore, this is how ProMexico encourages the Mexican industry and is going to foster Mexican exports. This is the potential of this sector is about to be increased in the following years. We have to remember that tourism has been increasing interruptedly, of course, with the extraordinary work of all the secretary and the state secretaries, because it has not only grown worldwide. In 1980, there was 277 million tourists around the world. Today, that figure exceeds 1 billion people, and by the 2030 we will have around 1.8 billion travelers. Therefore, we have to take advantage of this potential because tourism is um, is growing as a factor of social development, as stated by President Peña Nieto on here at Acapulco on March 23rd. In addition of increasing the number of visitors and tourists, these represent a greater economic flow. I would like to once again take advantage so as to acknowledge the work that the Secretary of Tourism is conducting in order to foster the prosperity of our country. Globally, Mexico ranks 44th according to the competitiveness survey of the Global Economic Forum. Some advantages recognized by the forum is the wealth of our natural and ecological wealth. This is, we have reefs, more than 45,000 ecological sites, and lots of locations which are the so-called worldwide heritage. Just yesterday, the World Travel and Tourism Council presented a survey about the economic impact of the tourist sector in our country. I would like to share some of the most relevant figures that arise from this survey. Tourist sector is one of the most competitive and growing sectors in our country. In 2014, this accounted for 14% of the GDP and 7.4% of national jobs. It is estimated that in the following 10 years, the employment of this sector would account for 8.1% of national employment. As stated by Secretary Ruiz Massieu, tourism is a secure bet, and direct foreign investment is represents a growing engine. That's because President Peña Nieto is fostering our country for development. In this sense, Mexico has attracted $13.4 billion in the last few years. Investments in tourism sector, mainly in infrastructure, will grow because the national infrastructure plan plans to invest 3%. This is 184 billion pesos for the fostering of tourist projects. In total, in tourism, we will have the investment of 141 billion pesos. Greatest investment for state and regional projects in tourism would be for the state of Quintana Roo, state of Mexico, and Yucatan with 15, 14, and 12% respectively. Out of the six investment sectors of the National Infrastructure Plan, this is the one with the greatest percentage of private resources with 63%. Mexico is a service country, and actually, as you can see, the tertiary sector accounts for around 60% of the GDP. In 2013, Mexico exported to the U.S. more than $17.7 billion in the service sector. And the major export sector of services was that of tourism with around $12.2 billion. In 2014, Mexico received a historical maximum of $217 billion in income because of tourism in our country. We expect that for the year 2025, we will have 408 million, and the number of tourists would be more than 39 million for such a year. An interesting fact is to see how this impacts the rest of the economy. Well, for every $1 million generated by the tourism sector, we generate 1.5 million for GDP. This impact of the tourism sector is greater than that for financial or telecom or agricultural sectors. The impact and the economic flow for the economy turns out to be significant. The tourism sector is interconnected with all the Mexican economy. When we take a look at all these, the tourism industry creates links throughout its supply chain and likewise through income generated by the purchases from the different sectors. In this regard, you can see in this graph that by every million sales in the tourism sector, $89,000 impact the GDP in the retail sector, or the financial sector earns $25 million because this is when paying with credit card or sometimes when you get a grant a credit in order to travel. Mexico receives tourists mainly from the US and Canada as well. One of our competitive edges in this sector is our geographical location and strategic time zones, mainly in Quintana Roo. The major industries indicators of the industry show that the medical tourism in 2013 reached $2.47 million, which is equal to the export of beer and tequila together. Both are for health. We're speaking of a health tourism, a healthy tourism. We expect for this industry to grow an annual mean rate of 17% until we reach 315,000 by the year 2016. The medical tourism accounts for 80 to 90%. We have around 100 hospitals certified with standards that are similar to international ones. Likewise, this, of course, opens future opportunities. Medical specialties in Mexico that has drawn more visitors from abroad are cardiology, plastic surgery, oncology, orthopedics, and oncology, amongst others, but these are the major ones. What we're seeing here is the TPP. What we see in TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, this is 1% of products, but 8% of them are for the short and medium term. We eliminate the visas amongst the member countries. We create a platform for the mobility of students and academicians. And to a certain point, this would represent an integrated market, which is the MILA market. This is we're going to standardize sanitary certificates, and at this point in time, we have the chairmanship since last year. There are 32 observing countries, and the message is that we have opportunities with these three other countries, plus the ones that can be added, of having a showcase and a possibility of showing Mexico so that they can come and know Mexico even further from a tourist viewpoint because of the importance that tourism has for TTP. TPP, one of the technical groups for such mechanism, is dedicated to tourism. These are a series of approaches that we are carrying out with other countries, but tourism ranks on the top. We are looking for the possibility of developing uh, tourism amongst these countries. As of now, TPP has shown interesting figures. Here are the results. We have 48 seminars, 18 joint participations in trade shows, 4 business meetings, 2 macro round meetings, and a gastronomic and cultural event. This is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Sectura and PROMÉXICO will move on working together so as to trigger new projects in Mexico that would strengthen the tourist dedication, growth, and employment in the country. By the same token, we will carry out actions in order to improve the image of Mexico abroad, and in this manner, with the leadership of the Secretary Meade, we will move on into many places. We will be showcasing Mexico differently, in addition of the extraordinary tourism activity, Madam Secretary. But of course, we would like to create better jobs for Mexico's the attraction of foreign investment to Mexico, the export of tourist services. Of course, that's a strategy in order to move on stepping up scale and to be placed on the major top tourist destinations. This trip is just starting. There are many miles ahead of us, but I'm sure that the 40th anniversary of Tianguis Turístico is a sample that we are heading the right direction. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon to you all. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I want to thank the director of ProMexico for his participation, where he clearly depicted the connection, tourism, and the activities made by ProMexico has with this promotion activity we have in our country. As we have seen, tourism is a strength that transforms, and not only Mexico, but some other things because it creates job, employment, and infrastructure, but as well the relationship our country has with the other countries of the world. It does transform this relationship because by means of the experiences lived by a tourist when being in Mexico, the experience we Mexicans suffer them, we are creating this confidence liaisons and this understanding bridges. And the president of our country has this idea very clear. It is important that Mexico will have a very close, renewed, fresh relationship that will project everything we are abroad. And in this very particular orchestra, Chancellor or the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Meade, sets the guideline. How do we relate it with the rest of the world, and how do we contribute from the tourism sphere in order to really have close relationships and set up the bridge. It is an honor for me to welcome the one who has brilliantly directed the others' efforts in order to really construct this confidence, trust, relationships, and liaisons that really have made of us one of the most visited countries. I will give the floor without any further ado to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jose Antonio Meade. Good afternoon, Ladies and gentlemen, well, between Claudia and Pancho made me very nervous. I was reviewing my speech, and I am worried because maybe I will fall a bit short. Well, I would like to thank the Secretariat of Tourism, the presence of municipal and state authorities, all the service providers, because we are living with a great momentum. This tourist approach. I have witnessed the 40th edition of the Anguis Turisco, and it's a great satisfaction to have it here in Acapulco because it is here where this great initiative was born. It was also here in Acapulco when the international agencies and professionals of the sectors gathered together under the leadership of Mexico, and the World Tourism Organization recognized the transformation tourism implies in citizen activity that promotes social welfare and at the same time is a vehicle of peace. This is vindicated by the president because it really plays a very important role. As the president said, we will make a quick review of these figures, and this really states the capacity tourism has to transform. According to the ILO, we say that this is directed with and the job creation, and one of the 11 employments we have is created here, and they really spread out to well over 1.4 billion dollars every year. I will really be focused on making just a recount as to how the specific figures are made in order to describe what is the role we at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs can do and the other ministries in order to really have a very outfitting approach for tourism all over the world. By mid last century, and as a result of an increase in productivity for the very first time, we created in the history of mankind more really more room for these leisure activities, and all these spaces together with the technological improvements transportation has had really gave a great boom to tourism. Traveling became a pleasure, and before it was just trying to do something in terms of leniency. And well, there was an old saying that said, the greatest pleasure of all is to travel. And in a crusade, it was really kind of something to experience this type of leniency, and actually we do not consider it penitence anymore. So governments are very attentive to the social benefits of the development of new industries, especially. This was explained due to the following fact, because when collecting more money, this was important. However, institutions were created in order to regulate, foster, and protect this tourist exchanges. Part of this boom of this construction in this environment had to do with the determination we had in the last century by the 50s about our recent history. We had the death of about 90 million people, and one other reason, as it was said in the post war, was that understanding which is born when traveling is a passport to peace. By means of their diplomats, nations decided to start this multilateral agreements, and these multilateral agreements were in essence understanding among the nations in order to protect the liberty of human beings, in order for them to really go and tour over the world. The Intergovernmental Commission, in terms of tourism, has its highest point at the beginning of the 1960s. The World Trade Organization, which is responsible of this sustainable, accessible development for everybody, offers leadership and support in order to really spread over this tourist policies. This diplomatic effort was not depleted when the governments were working. The first part of the 20th century also helped YACTA, which was created in 1945, and now it is really omnipresent, so as to neglect it, but yet has really created standards and policies that grow from security, the environment, and really support the area industry. An additional example is formed by the OASI. And it was created in 1994 with the 191 members. It has, this is one of the international agencies that has a full membership, and new practices and standards are created in order to really guarantee the global aviation system. There is one other RF saying that states that if you do not travel, you will not be able to know how valuable people are. This is why we travel. Today, diplomacy works in some other multilateral agencies in order to really guarantee the dissemination of these values. We need to highlight what is done at UNESCO, and due to what is done there, we really acknowledge the collection of ideas of the member states and the knowledge they have. We have a large list of members, 32, and we also have UNESCO, which also promotes the permanence and diversity and cultural richness that characterizes the nations. With UNESCO, these diplomatic entities, and this is of the utmost importance for Mexico, in several trends, for instance, the collection and preservation of the World Heritage of Creative Cities. In some other multilateral spaces, the ministries of foreign affairs really support all of this by means of promoting public policies aimed at creating a more favorable environment. At the OECD, we see reforms and governance for the tourist sector, including tax regimes, migration, and air connectivity. The efforts made by diplomats in order to foster tourism also go to the regional environment. Countries as a whole are really form a part of structural socioeconomic entities, which are also geographically considered. And this is why the development of tourism is really conditioned to sustainability and to the integration, cooperation, and regional consensus principles. An example of this is the creation of this sustainable area at the Caribbean that has been fostered for the last 15 years and which was finally approved in 2013. Yet, the Association of Caribbean States, some other regional examples are the ones we make with the Caribbean Association and also with the Mayan Association with Central America. This is an initiative where Mexico will have their pro tempore chairmanship. The efforts made by our diplomacy really go beyond the near borders in order to develop community spaces that will foster innovation in terms of services that must be provided by tourism. The Schengen space, which takes place at the Gulf, and that Pancho highlighted, really includes Colombia, Chile, and Peru in the Asia Pacific region. These regional diplomatic efforts, as Pancho said, really can be translated in the elimination of visas and more trips. And now this makes Latin America a very important place in terms of tourism because it opens the possibility to promote our different tourist destinations by means of the construction and strengthening of bilateral bilateral relationships, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs also try and tend to increase tourist flows in a very natural way. We have the embassies and the consulates, and Secretary Ruiz Macias said that they were in a privileged position in order to promote the country abroad. This promotion and network is used by the states, and in the case of Mexico, it really takes advantage of it in order to disseminate content, for instance, the cultural richness of our country. And beyond this, there are some initiatives where diplomacy comes together with promotion. A very specific example has to do with emblematic commemoration that really clown these bilateral efforts. And here we can speak about what we do every 2 years. The next year, this year, we will have it with Great Britain. Next time with Germany, then with LA, and we have also had this with Turkey. Diplomacy is also expressed in the promotion of trade shows and some other entities, or by means of local governments. One of the important users of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs promotional efforts is also promoted every 2 years, and at the Ministries of Foreign Affairs. And here we can speak about the southern and national governments. One other event which is a really very important one, and that goes beyond formal diplomacy, are the honorary councils. We have personalities that have been, or celebrities that are recognized, but are also working at the consulates and promoting tourism. And this network really gives power and supplements what we do. And actually, in every corner of the world, we can take care of the people in order to be close to it. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs actively participates at the forum held by those who promote tourist activities, and it also takes part in our consulates, and we make of tourism a dialogue instrument with the rest of the world. We promote bilaterally all these relationships that make of tourism an instrument to strengthen and promote Mexico. In all these efforts, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs goes hand in hand and works hand in hand with the Ministry of Tourism, because stronger Mexico that is visited by very many people will be stronger. Tourism is an ally of foreign policy because this allows understanding and friendship among the peoples to be together. Thanks to this tourist activity, the peoples of the world are better known, and we know all the contributions they have made to universal history. Thanks to tourism, our country is more recognized and appreciated all over the world. And we say that what people feel about Mexico in terms of appreciation is a very solid one. The conference given last Monday by former Prime Minister Blair went to the following: who is accountable of tourism? He did not anticipate uh, an answer, but if we are now back in this ranking of the 10 most visited countries, we have been able to see that we have received more and tourists. We have had more currencies, more income, and Mexico must be very thankful because of the commitment we have expressed is really very important. We have 679 buyers, 64 countries, and Mexico is involved. We have 22 1,500 meters for the trade show, but actually everything, and I agree with Tony Blair, one of the important reasons I must go to is that you have a great secretary. Thank you very much and congratulations.
We would like to thank you for participating in these two excellent presentations. I learned a lot this evening. I'm sure that you have learned something new because of the presentation of our Chancellor and Director General of ProMéxico. Thank you for being with us. And we hope to see you this evening at the cocktail party of the headquarters of Tianguis Turístico 2016 at the Firma Princess, 7 o'clock. Thank you very much.